Hello, I'm Larry Dixon, and this is a conversation with First Baptist Church, Moorhead, Kentucky. With me today is interim pastor John Lepper.
Hello.
John, good to have you with us here today. This is a series that we've been doing to get to know the people that regularly attend or part of the church. So the first question always is, not from around here, are you?
You can tell by the way I talk. I grew up in Florida, was born near the town of Live Oak, Florida, and we moved around quite a bit. My dad was a farmer. He later became a carpenter and followed some large jobs, and so I grew up in Florida.
Most people have a passion or a hobby. What are your interests outside of church, of course?
Yes. Well, I would say two. In the past year, during these COVID times, I have taken up again what I've enjoyed for a long time, and that is riding a bicycle. I have a goofy little bicycle. It is a recumbent. Small wheels, sits down low. You're sitting in kind of a chair. I understand recumbent means reclining. So it's a goofy little bicycle. But I will brag and say I rode 2,000 miles last year in 9 months.
That's impressive.
Thank you, sir. But the second thing, I enjoy doing that very much, and it helps my health, let's hope. But the second thing I really enjoy doing is my wife and I enjoy traveling. We have 2 daughters and 2 sons-in-laws and 5 grandchildren. One set of family lives in North Africa, one set lives in Eastern Europe, and we enjoy going to visit them. And we had 3 trips planned this year that got canceled because of COVID. But we are hoping that the restrictions will be lifted soon and we'll get to travel again.
Well, since you mentioned travel, what has been the most interesting trip that you've taken?
Well, I would say we've had a couple of trips kind of along the way. One trip, our daughter, who lived in Africa at the time, she still does, their first child was less than a year old, and we couldn't seem to get to their country to visit them, and they said, why don't we meet in Austria? We flew into Vienna, we took a train to Salzburg, and we met our granddaughter for the first time on the platform of the train platform. We rented a car and went into the Alps and spent about 8 nights there. It was a beautiful, beautiful trip.
Well, that sounds like a very exciting trip. Did you have another one that you would recommend that people go on?
Well, at another time, we went to Slovakia, and while we were there, the whole family took a cheap flight trip to London. And we spent about a week in London, and we just really enjoyed it.
Well, faith comes to every individual in various ways and times in their lives and so forth. So what brought you to this faith?
I grew up in a Christian home. My dad and mother were both very faithful. And so I was never sent to church. I was taken to church. We went to church as a family, and we were those 3-time-a-week Baptists generally Sunday morning, Sunday evening, and Wednesday evening. And so faith was cultivated in me, and I was nurtured at a very young age and took an interest in learning about God and learning about the Bible from a very early age.
Well, the Bible is full of various characters, personalities, unique individuals, with the exception of Jesus. Which would you like to take to Cracker Barrel and spend the day with?
Well, you told me that I would have this question ahead of time, and so I pondered, and it was difficult to come up with a person. But I have decided that I would like to spend the day with Barnabas at Cracker Barrel. Barnabas has been somewhat of a role model for me. His name basically means one who encourages. And he encouraged the early church by selling a field and giving the money. I really like what he did with Paul, because he basically recommended Paul, and may have made a big difference in Saul becoming Paul to the early church, because he recommended him to the church when they were very fearful of him after Paul's conversion. But what I really like about Barnabas, and I'd like to have some conversation with him about this, is how was it when he and Paul split ways because he wanted John Mark to have another chance. And I just have appreciated the fact that Barnabas gave young Mark another chance when Paul would not do that, and they split ways. And I'd like to have some conversation with Barnabas about that.
Well, that's interesting. That is not one that I would have even considered. Very interesting. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to share with us, such as, in your early life, were you, a longshoreman on a starship, or, your early years?
Well, I'm not sure what I need to say at this point, but there's an unknown thing about me that people don't know unless they've been around me much. I was born with a birth defect. Both feet were clubbed. They were turned in 90 degrees and over 90 degrees. My dad was a farmer, lived some distance from Jacksonville, but learned there was an orthopedic specialist in Jacksonville, Florida. And they would spend all day taking me to this specialist, even as an infant. I never had to have surgery. An infant's bones are very pliable, and the specialist bent my feet, put them in casts, and I walked late, but I walked and never had to wear very corrective shoes. There was a time, it was interesting, that they put the wrong foot on the wrong foot so my feet would turn correctly. And people would always tell my parents, "You've accidentally put the boy's shoes on the wrong feet," and they would have to explain. But something interesting about me.
Well, that's been interesting. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
I think that's enough.
That's enough. Well, this has been another episode of Conversation with First Baptist Church in Moorhead. John, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.